Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. This is how Professor John Keating explains what literature is in the film That Poet's Society. Literature is a phenomenon of creation, the most beautiful and noble one. And the amazing thing is that may even derive from a phenomenon of destruction, such as war. In fact, war is a recurring theme in literature, which has been explored since ancient times. I have chosen to talk about the literature of the 20s and 30s, which is obviously linked to the events of the First World War. The purpose of this study is to analyze the radical change which took place in the entire Western society in the years between the two world wars, by analyzing the works of English, American, and German authors, who were at the same time witnesses and narrators of the events which transformed the course of history irreversibly and had very important consequences. The population losses and economic disruptions caused by 4.5 years of total war were immense. The gap between the generation of the young and the older one, regarded as responsible for the waste of lives during the war, grew wider and wider. Nothing seemed to be certain or right. Even science and religion seemed to offer little comfort or security. The feelings of ruthlessness and frustration were strengthened by the serious economic and political problems that Europe had to face once the war was over. In those years, the role of the writers consisted in mediating between the solid and unquestioned values of the past and the confused and uncertain present. Novelists rejected omniscient narration, and the viewpoint shifted from the external world to the internal world of a character's mind. The stream of consciousness technique, or interior monologue, was introduced. The works that I have taken into consideration are Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway, Goodbye to All That by Robert Graves, Im Westen nichts Neues by Erich Maria Remarque, Trommel in der Nacht by Bertolt Brecht, and finally Kleiner Mann was nun by Hans Fallada. Mrs. Dalloway indirectly talks about the war. Septimus, the co-protagonist and alter ego of Mrs. Dalloway, is a World War I veteran who was injured in trench warfare and now suffers from shell shock, which at the end leads him to the drastic decision of committing suicide. In A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway, the war is presented as something inevitable, the outcome of a cruel and senseless world, and therefore no one is to be blamed. This novel deals with the story of an American ambulance driver, Lieutenant Frederick Henry, on the Italian front during World War I. There he falls in love with a beautiful English nurse, Catherine, who soon gets pregnant. Their love story is hindered, however, by the war that makes it impossible for them to live a happy life. Eventually, during childbirth, something goes terribly wrong, and both Catherine and the baby die. Goodbye to All That by Robert Graves is an account of his life, including his experience of war, until 1929, when he published it at the age of 35. In Im Westen nichts Neues, All Quiet on the Western Front by Erich Maria Remarque, the Great War is seen through the eyes of the defeated. symbolically represented by a group of friends from school who joined the army voluntarily after listening to the stirring patriotic speeches of their teachers. However, after experiencing the unimaginable brutality of life on the front, they soon realized that the truth about war is really different from what propaganda used to say. Paul's friends are killed in combat one by one, and in the end, on October 1918, on a day with so little fighting that the army report read all quiet on the Western Front, Paul is killed too. In Trommel in der Nacht, Drums in the Night, by Bertolt Brecht, the protagonist is André Kragler, who, once returned from the front, discovers that in his absence his girlfriend has agreed to marry another man. Moreover, the society doesn't treat him as a war hero, with respect and dignity, but rather as an outcast, a good for nothing. Kleiner Mann was nun, Little Man what now, by Hans Fallada, doesn't concern the war, but its consequences. It provides a vivid, poignant picture of life in Germany just before Hitler's takeover, and focuses on a young married couple struggling to survive in the country's nightmarish inflation. All the characters of the stories taken into consideration, losers or winners, share a common feeling of defeat. The First World War was the price paid by the generation of the young for the lack of wisdom of the older one. It has been a terrible price, and the tragedy is that even after having paid this price, they didn't obtain a long-lasting peace. Instead, after only 21 years, there has been another World War that was even more devastating and led to more misery, desperation, and death. However, mankind does not learn from its mistakes and continues to walk on the same road which has already led to the disaster.